We start 9 News at 5 today with updates on day 2 of the strike in the largest school district in Colorado. Once again, we saw teachers in Denver marching from schools this afternoon. Yesterday, that march went to the state capitol. Today, it ended at Civic Center Park. Just a short distance away, both sides have been holding meetings at the Denver Central Library. However, the district and the teachers have spent the majority of the day meeting with their own groups instead of talking with each other. At this point, it's looking as if the strike could move into a third day.
9 News reporter Katie Eastman has been keeping an eye on the negotiations since they resumed at 10 this morning. So, Katie, give us the latest at this hour.
And Kim and Tom, those district leaders and the teachers union are currently in caucus right now, which, as you said, that has been what most of today has been filled with. I think we calculated they have been caucusing for more than 5 hours. So they have been alone in separate private rooms, much more than they have been at the negotiating table today. And teachers have told us that they felt a little frustrated that they've been focusing on the tiny details rather than that bigger picture of increasing their base salary. So in total, both sides have come to the negotiating table twice today, and each time it was less than a half hour. And they've been talking about PDUs. Those are professional development units that are unique to the Denver School District. They are courses that are offered through the district, and when teachers take them, they currently get a bonus, but teachers want them to be tied to salary increases. So today, the district in their proposal said that they would offer teachers 3 credits per PDU that would go toward total credits to help a teacher jump up in salary. Teachers say that is closer to what they want in this final deal. And after 3 hours of that first caucus, they came back to the table with a counter proposal. One thing they wanted to add was to allow teachers to work on those professional development units during their regular work week. So far, that has been the discussion today. Those PDUs, which they can be confusing to someone who is not inside those negotiations. Teachers admit it can sometimes be confusing to them. They want to talk about overall base salary. A lot of the teachers are leaving today. When they left, they said they will be ready to come to teach tomorrow, but they will also be ready to join the picket lines tomorrow. Negotiations will last here at the library until it closes at 8 tonight. They have reserved this room for tomorrow as a precautionary measure as well, because both sides hope to come to a resolution at the end of the day today. Right now, we're not sure. Anything could happen. Tom and Kim?
It sounds like it. Back and forth. All right. Thank you so much, Katie.